Hi, everyone. This is Danielle from the Are You Listening podcast, and this is episode 3 of From the Table, our updates on bargaining. Today, we're talking to two folks from the PTLFC unit. Could you guys introduce yourselves, please?
Go ahead, Dan.
I'm Dan Sidorick. I'm a PTL in the Labor Studies Department.
And I'm Howie Swerdloff. I'm a PTL in the New Brunswick Writing Program.
Thanks so much. Today, we're going to be talking about Article 4 in your contract and Article 28 in the full-time units. Could you both go into a little bit of detail of what that is?
This contract, the adjunct union is going for something called fractional appointments. And that is something that takes a little bit of explanation. So I want to explain a little bit about what the reasoning is behind it, and then what it means a little more specifically. Up to this point, adjuncts or PTLs, as we're known at Rutgers, have been paid by the course essentially as temp workers. We are paid a really small amount with no benefits, and we go from semester to semester that way. But if you look at the courses that we teach, they are the same courses that NTTs, that full-time non-tenure track professors teach at Rutgers. We have the same qualifications, and we have to do all the work that is associated with that. We have to grade just as many papers, have just as many office hours, all those things. So essentially, when we look at what the work that we do, we are actually NTTs. We are non-tenure track. It's just that we're not treated as NTTs. Now, we're not full-time NTTs because we're teaching 1 or 2 or 3 courses, but what we are is fractional NTTs. And so, with this realization, we have come to the conclusion that we need to be paid and receive the benefits that NTTs get, not at the full level that full-time NTTs get, but at the equivalent of the fraction of work that we do compared to full-timers. So if in my department, a full-time NTT teaches 8 courses an academic year, and PTL teaches 4 courses in an academic, 2 and 2, then under fractional appointments, they would be working 50% of the time as a full-time NTT doing the exact same work. And so the pay and benefits would be 50% of what a full-time NTT is receiving. So the whole reasoning behind this is the concept of equal pay for equal work. Now, this is a real bedrock concept. And I saw a recent poll that 92% of Americans believe in equal pay for equal work. And it's just, basic fairness, basic justice. So that's the basic idea behind it. So to get a little bit into the specifics of what our Article 4 would calculate, what percentage of time each PTL, now each fractional NTT, what proportion of a full-time NTT they are working, and then the salary would be that direct proportion. It would be a direct fraction. There's no justification whatsoever for that being less than the equivalent fraction. A possible objection could be that, well, NTTs often do other work. And in my department, there are NTTs that actually direct, different institutes and things within our department. But for those things, NTTs get course releases. So instead of for 8 courses, they might be getting paid. They might have to teach 6 courses and then do this additional work. So that's half of the answer to that. The other half is that we are doing a lot of extra work. We many recommendation letters every semester. We are meeting with students when students are having problems, including personal COVID related, just the same as full-time NTTs do. So, so this would, really be coming into the 21st century, the idea that people should be paid the same for doing the same amount of work is the core concept. And with getting fractional NTTs in this contract, we will move Rutgers into the forefront of teaching equality in America.
Dan, can you tell us a little bit about how those numbers would actually change under fractional appointments?
Okay, sure. Currently, a L1 makes $57.99 per course, and when we win fractional appointments, we'll be earning $99.09 per course. But it's important, I think, to understand that we're not just talking about going for a particular percentage increase. We're approaching this very differently. What we're saying is that we believe in equal pay for equal work. So that $99.09, where that comes from, is what a full-time NTT currently makes per course. So we have the same qualifications, we do the same work, so PTL should be paid the exact same amount. So it turns out to be $99.09 for an initial PTL course, so that would be a significant increase, clearly, over what we're currently making.
By the way, Danielle, at the higher ranks, so for example, people who are PTL 3s now, they would be making considerably more as well, $17,661 per course. Big increases here.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Shows you how underpaid we are now.
Yeah. Can you explain the different ranks of PTLs just really briefly so people understand how that works?
So in the last contract, they created a ranking system, PTL 1, 2, and 3, and most PTLs are PTL 1s. You need to teach 12 semesters in order to advance. And one of the problems with this is that breaks in service, as they're called, even if you're working at the university in another category like NTT, make the clock start all over again. So this is what happens to people. They work as NTTs and then they go back to being PTLs and they lose their seniority. So there's really some flaws in the system that we intend to correct.
So it does, as Howie said, it takes 12 semesters in order to be able to apply for PTL2 position. And then it takes 24 semesters before you can apply for a PTL.
And all without breaks. And that would include like if you weren't teaching for your semester.
Yes.
And oftentimes, just to clarify, appointments are not necessarily in the control of a PTL. So say there's a course that doesn't need to be offered one semester, or they have too many people teaching it, or a full-time professor who sometimes teaches it suddenly is teaching it that semester.
Yes.
And then that PTL who might have had 10, 11 semesters teaching in a row, then would presumably have to start all over again.
Yes. And by the way, Danielle, winter and summer semesters are not included. So if you, and we are demanding that they be counted like any other semester for the purposes of seniority. Winter and summer are not part of our contract because of the quirks of the arrangement at Rutgers.
Howie and Dan, I wonder if you could both sort of backtrack a little and tell us a little bit about how it was that your unit came together to create these demands.
Yeah, well, what we did, we decided to approach the whole contract campaign this time very differently from the way it was done last time. Rather than just having a couple people in leadership come up with the demands and really do all the negotiations themselves, the current leadership of the PTL union were all rank and file members who were unhappy with some aspects of our previous contract. And so we ran for the board and leadership positions, and we want to do this in a very different way. And what that way is we want to be a member-led union. The demands to come from the members. You know, there's no one or two of us that are so all-knowing that we know what is best for all PTLs in all situations. So we repeatedly put out calls to members to get involved in the contract campaign. We set up what we called article committees. For each article of the contract, we set up a committee. Each article had many members, both rank and file members as well as board members. So for instance, Article 4 is the salaries committee that I volunteered for, along with, I guess, 8 or 10 members altogether on that committee. And then together we hashed out what our contract demands would be. And this was a real repetitive process. We would come up with some initial ideas, hash that out, talk it over with other people. And eventually we came up with a set of demands for each article. We then took them to the board that has to approve. In many cases, we changed our demands based on feedback from others. For example, on the salary committee in particular, we had this basic idea that corresponds to an increase of, roughly, 5,000 or 6,000 per course to something closer to 10,000 a course. But initially we were phrasing that as a significant increase in our pay for each time, which would be the typical way that a previous contract demand would have been presented. But after hearing about a proposal that had been made years ago in the full-time union and talking with other of our long-term members like Karen Thompson, who was one of the founders of our union, we came to the realization that we really needed to reframe how we're talking about salaries. So our salary demand, the whole framing of it and the language in it was changed to reflect this idea that, we are entities, but fractional or part-time entities. So we need to be paid, and our benefits and job security need to go along with that, so that we get the fractional percentage of all those things that full-time entities get.
The beauty of this way of thinking about PTL, fractional entities instead of part-time lecturers, is that recall that the university has stymied our attempt to merge into one union, even though we have well over 1,000 signatures of PTLs who want to be one union. This really supersedes that, in the sense that if we're all NTTs, there's no more PTL union. So this is our focus now, and it solves the problem of being in these separate entities when we go back and forth between different job categories all the time. We really need to be in the same union as well as being the same job category.
Thank you so much for explaining that. As you said, Dan, this is only one part of it, thinking about it in terms of salary changes. Could you talk a little bit more about some of the other things that are critical?
Yeah, one of the clauses actually that I wrote the initial version of, I'm happy to say, is that the old contract, we had very limited tuition remission for PTLs, but it was very restrictive, and almost no one was able to take advantage of it. And our demand and our new contract is for any fractional entity should be able to take up to 2 courses per semester with no tuition charges. Now, this is important to all of us, but in particular to those grads who had previously had funding, but then when their funding runs out, what Rutgers does all the time is that it then offers those grads positions as PTLs, but then they also have to pay tuition at that point. So when they have to pay tuition, their paychecks goes right back to the university in tuition. So Howie, there are several other points.
Yeah, I have one that I'd like to share, because it demonstrates how a democratic process like article committees results in a contract that takes care of people's needs. And this one is about lab and studio work. We had a member of the article committee, Estelle, who teaches an astronomy lab, and she is paid based on the number of credits that students earn for the lab, which is 2 credits, right? Instead of the number of hours that she puts in order to teach the lab, which is approximately twice that, 4 hours a week. So, the proposal states now fractional entities, which is what we would be called, doing lab and studio work will be compensated on the hours worked, not the credits earned by students. And we have a number of demands in this proposal that came from the members who were concerned, passionate, I should say, about a particular issue. And when the university gives us their counter proposal, we will go back to the salary committee and have them review it. They're the experts now on all of these issues in Article 4, and have them make proposals that counter the university's counteroffer. It's a very, very nice way of doing this. An issue that is of importance to many of our members is their access to healthcare. And certainly in the middle of a pandemic, it's absolutely outrageous that any Rutgers employees are not covered by health insurance. I mean, it really is a sin. And so we're addressing that in Article 4. And what we're saying now is that fractional entities with appointments of 50% or greater of a full-time equivalent. So that's a concept that we introduced in this article. We had to come up with what a full-time NTT typically works. 20 credits a year. Anyone working 10 credits a year should be entitled to health benefits. So if we can win that would be a tremendous advance. Another issue that it was important to many of our members. We have a number of instructors who teach writing intensive courses. Some work for the writing program, but others work in other areas. The problem is that course caps are sometimes arbitrarily changed, often after the PTL gets an appointment letter with an approximate enrollment number, and the PTL signs that appointment letter and goes to work preparing a course. And then the semester starts, and they decide they're going to double the number or triple the number, or right. Instead of opening another section, they make it impossible to do an effective job of teaching. Writing courses in particular need to be small because there's lots of feedback, lots of one-on-one with the instructor, and there's lots of research that shows the importance of that. Dan, you have a story, I think, that really illustrates this problem, right?
As Howie said, all Rutgers students have to start out with taking expository writing as freshmen, but then they're required to take a couple additional courses that satisfy writing intensive requirements. And those two requirements are both satisfied by a course that I teach and many other people in the labor studies teach as well. In U.S. labor history, we have usually 26 sections of that every semester. It's so popular. So for these courses, the instructors are required to give multiple papers and multiple versions of each paper. So students write, I comment on each draft individually, give edits, suggestions, and taking into account the requirements of the writing across the disciplines and writing with revision requirements. So to do all this, that course, these writing intensive courses take a lot more work from instructors than most regular courses in most of our experience. But despite that fact, the writing intensive courses have either 40 or 70 students per section. If you don't have a TA, you get 40 students. If you have a TA, you get 70 students. And these courses always fill up. It's always at the max. And trying to do a good job for 40 students and reading each of their papers and commenting on each of them, it is draining for the instructors, but it's also bad for the students. I mean, we are definitely not at our optimum, after we've gotten to our 38th or 39th paper that we're commenting on. So we're going for a maximum of 20 students per course in any writing intensive course. And then the other topic that Howie alluded to is just that the university has been raising course caps in general, not just talking about writing. Another course that I teach, an asynchronous course, the course cap was always 25. When COVID came along, that course cap was raised to 30. So, a 20% increase in class size. Of course, I don't get paid anymore. And after, the last few years, it hasn't been reduced. It stayed at 30. This is typical. There's nothing special about me or that course. This has happened across the university.
So our proposal in Article 4 is to penalize the department for raising the course caps by $200 a student. And the intent there is to discourage them from doing that and instead to open another section. And the other thing we're demanding is classes of more than 30 students should be assigned TAs.
And PTLs are currently not assigned TAs for courses?
Very, very rarely. Very rarely. As Dan said, if there are 70 students in a class that get a TA.
I always teach a 40 student class without a TA. I was offered a TA if I would go up to 70 students per class. And I said, no, that's just insane. There's no way I can do.
And that would be for a writing course.
Or for a writing intensive course. And even with a TA, there's no way. So I stuck with my 40, which is not a good alternative, but I preferred that to 70 with the TA.
Just the differences in feedback from one person to the next. It doesn't necessarily do the thing you want it to do, which is to offer a student the continuity of continued assessment of their work to help them grow and develop. That's what we're doing in a writing course. The best way to do that is to make sure that they have that continuity from the same voice and a small enough number that can be closely paid attention to. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah, point.
And the research says exactly what you just said, Danielle. It's very, very important. Incidentally.
Yeah, if we're a public institution, then we owe our students those kinds of resources.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. We'll come back after we've had an opportunity to go into bargaining session and hear how the administration responds to these demands. Thank you so much, and I hope you can both join us for that part too. We are back for the second half of our bargaining update, joined by a number of PTLs and also some students. Would you all mind introducing yourselves?
My name is Alex Ascencio. I'm going to be a rising junior studying political science and criminal justice at Rutgers.
I'm Izzy, or Isabel Nuñez, but I prefer Izzy. I'm a poli-sci and history major at Rutgers, and I'm a current junior.
Hey, everybody. My name is Austin Rooney. I'm a PTL in the philosophy and religion department at Rutgers campus.
I'm Heather Pierce. I am also a PTL in the Department of Political Science in New Brunswick.
Hi, I'm Karen Thompson, longtime PTL in the New Brunswick English Writing Program.
And one of our union's founders, correct?
Yes.
Great. Thanks so much for being here, Karen.
Hi, my name's Edan Blank. I guess I don't know what we're doing with introductions, but I guess I can say I'm a political science and psychology double major at Rutgers, entering my junior year right now.
Thank you so much. Can we start with Howie and Dan just for a quick rundown? Can you just tell us a little bit about how that went?
Well, we had an introduction from our president, Amy Heiger, who provided the historical context about the gigification of universities and how they are increasingly relying on contingent labor to do the majority of the teaching. And then we ran through our Article 4 proposal from 1 through 11. Each point, we then explained what it meant and why it was important. And then we had various people give testimony about their experiences with the current system for each of those aspects. It was quite moving. People who had issues with health insurance, with not being paid what they were promised, with having their class sizes enlarged, and all kinds of various injustices, really, and how these affect the teachers and the students and the impact on the students. It was pretty comprehensive as far as information and testimony, examples.
The university has seen this proposal before, but this was the first time that we really explained it in some detail to them and to the people that were attending. I think one of the important things about it is that there were over 50 people attending the negotiations, almost all of them, with the exception of, I believe, 4 people on the administration side. Everyone else was from the union side. So we did that kind of presentation. They didn't really do much talking at all. They caucused at one point in the middle and came back, and they only had one comment. And that was that our approach on fractional appointments sounded like we were trying to do a one-size-fits-all solution, which they were implying was not the way to go. But as far as we're concerned, that's exactly what we want to do. We shouldn't allow the university to divide us into different groups and give some PTLs the benefits of fractional appointments, and other PTLs continue to pay them as piece workers. We're all in this together. All PTLs need to be recognized as fractional entities going forward.
The overarching value that we were promoting there is equal pay for equal work. And we said that repeatedly in the course of the evening, that this is something that Rutgers needs to stand for. And various speakers asked the administration, do you believe in equal pay for equal work? And if not, what is your alternative? And if you do, how might you structure that system to promote equal pay for equal work if you don't agree with our proposals? But the other side are attorneys, and this is what they do. And they're negotiating with 19 different unions at Rutgers, and they're very expert at having poker faces and not letting on what they're up to. So they're very opaque, and it's very hard to read them and to know whether they're having any reaction whatsoever to some of the stories, which were quite compelling.
Yeah, for the folks who've never joined before, I just really wanted to ask you guys what it was like to witness that, because I think that can be pretty overwhelming to see people share these incredibly compelling stories, their testimonies of their experiences as workers, and sort of how the administration responds to not only these philosophical questions of how is it that you perceive workers, but the actual stories of individuals in front of them.
I mean, I'll go first. I think Howie brought up the interesting point of the fact that Rutgers hired attorneys or experts. These union busters, their whole job is to just dissolve the efforts of a union. I mean, I don't know. I hear so much news about, workers unionizing at other corporations and whatnot. And, it's hopeful. What saddens me though is, I mean, I've been going to this university. I personally really do enjoy this university. It's just a shaming how little it seems that they care for their workers who contribute a lot to this university. I mean, PTLs are just as much deserving of equal pay as our full-time tenured professors as well. And I've been fortunate enough to have many professors, many great professors, many of whom are PTLs. And it's just, disheartening that the university, instead of treating it seriously, sends over a rep who's just munching on food while hearing people pour their heart and soul out.
I feel like the testimonies, especially, they were extremely comprehensive. They went into a lot of different things, and a lot of those things are extremely problematic and also relatable to so many people. So when I think Howie was talking about the class sizes and how the caps are not respected, that really resounded with me, because it is oftentimes people from low income backgrounds and people of color who face those repercussions because of that. So I thought the testimony was really empowering.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure who brought it up, but someone brought up the fact that they weren't getting TAs for classes over 30 people, which is just such a basic necessity. I mean, I feel like just as a student, being in classes that don't have a TA that are over 30 people, you don't feel like you're getting enough attention from the professor. You don't feel like the professor is able to get your grades back as quickly as you would want, which can also limit your ability in seeing how well you're doing in the class. And also the professor is, has so much work just on them when they could easily get a TA to help them out for that. And I think overall for me, I mean, I haven't really listened too much and been too involved in this union beforehand. So I was it was a really good experience for me to come watch you guys bargain, because I also, in general in unions don't really have much experience seeing that firsthand. To me, it was just really alarming, the whole thing, just how little basic necessities were being given, and just how easily it was for them to be dismissive and try to switch to a different topic. Like you were saying, how they're trying to make a one size fit all thing, and they didn't like that approach, instead of acknowledging the person who gave such a personal story about how they didn't have health insurance and a really serious health problem happened. And, thank God that they had a good manager at the time, but if they didn't, they could have seriously had a bad issue with their job. So yeah, it was really incredible how little care they had in comparison to also the the athletic department, who's getting so much money. There was a recent post that I saw that they spent $1,500 at a party or at a restaurant one night. And then hearing this in comparison, where you're not getting even the basic necessities that you deserve, that should be a right, it's very alarming and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, $1,500 is that's close to what some of our raises would be if we got them, right? For somebody's whole semester, it's a lot. It's kind of shocking how that becomes a huge number when we're asking for it for work.
I want to say these three students are really exceptional. They're great. They are so great.
I'm very proud of you guys.
We'd love to have you guys come to more sessions and give us more feedback, because when we're going through this process of bargaining, is we're trying to hold all of you in mind when we're doing it, right? Because our work, we're really aware, its greatest impacts are on our students. And so when we're fighting for our rights as workers, we're also fighting for your learning conditions. And so having you there to speak to exactly what that really feels like to you is an incredible thing. So I'm hoping that you'll have the opportunity to actually talk in those spaces too, because it's amazing just to have you here and give us your experience of having witnessed that. Austin and Karen, did you guys want to weigh in? And of course, Heather.
I'll go first, just because I can't possibly follow Karen. Whoever has to have that task is not going to.
Goes last.
Yeah. She's the showstopper. So part of what I was thinking at that session, so I was actually the note taker. So I can say, with some degree of certainty here that we were scheduled to meet for 2 hours. The session ended up only actually lasting for an hour and 40 minutes. Of that time, I think the lead negotiator for the administration spoke for 6 minutes all told, and was the only one from management who spoke. And this is with the management also requesting a caucus that lasted for 20 minutes. And as we heard earlier, from Dan and Howie, after which there wasn't much negotiating that went on after that. It was more of a technical question, which probably could have been resolved by just a close scrutiny of the document. But be that as it may, as I was going through it, living through it, I kept thinking to myself of this scene from Old School. Maybe under fair use, you can get this, Danielle, where James Carville is debating with Will Ferrell, and Will Ferrell's character goes first and does his whole thing. And Carville's like in rebuttal is like consulting with his cohort, and finally just has to come back and says, no response. That it almost seemed like that's what we were witnessing here, that there wasn't much you could really say back to the proposals as they were put forward and the testimonies that were provided. As we've heard, right? Equal pay for equal work. I mean, what are you going to say exactly to that? It's eminently reasonable. Teaching conditions or learning conditions. What are you going to say back to that? I guess all you can do then is say like, well, all right, we need to look at this globally, right? We need to see the entire document in its full purview, which is perfectly reasonable, right? But you would hope in a bargaining session that there would be bargaining or negotiating or some kind of back and forth. And by the way, so for the PTLs, our contract has already expired as well. I mean, there's a certain amount of urgency in this for us. And we've been requesting sessions for some time now, months at least. And this was only the second we were able to get. So you might have thought that there'd be a little reciprocity there, a shared sense of what's at stake, not just for us as employees of the university, but for the students, right? As we've heard, that all of this anxiety gets passed on to everybody throughout the entire campus community. And certainly as the students are the ones who are being forced into crippling debt, perhaps over this, that you might hope that there could be something that could be addressed with a certain amount of urgency. But I'll leave it at that and let the true stalwarts of the campaign here, HB and Karen, take it away.
I don't know how much I have to add to this, except I wanted to point out a couple of things that I'm not sure if we made these points already. This is not the first time, even in this bargaining campaign, that we have tackled this issue of equal pay for equal work and asked them just directly to at least agree with the principle. We've already covered this issue like at length in a full-time bargaining session with management. We've already asked admin, can you at least agree with the principle of equal pay for equal work? And they have not been able to come back and say that. Not even at a fundamental level will they agree with the concept of equal pay for equal work. And of course, this is all part of their strategy as well. Not to say that they don't necessarily as individuals agree with it, but they won't say this officially that they agree with this principle. And since Izzy brought up the issue of how class size is the burden of large class size is disproportionately falls on the shoulders of students of color and other marginalized groups, right? I want to say that this issue of equal pay for equal work, which is something that this phrase that we hear tied to often gender and race as well, is actually not, it is tangled up with this issue of adjunct pay, right? Because in academia over the last 30 years, we've seen an increase in women and people of color in the professoriate in academia, but disproportionately at the lowest ranks, at the adjunct ranks. So when we look at those highest paid professors, the full professors, we're still seeing disproportionate number of white men in these positions, and much of the increase has been at these lower ranks. Of course, we've seen an increase in adjunct professors overall as well, right? From something like less than 30% in the 70s to now, where it's 70% of professors across the country are contingent. And so this issue, when we say equal pay for equal work, of course, we're talking more broadly, but it's not related to issues of race and gender here. And I think that that's an important point. And they still, even given all that, and they know all of this, of course, refuse to just at a basic level agree with the principle of equal pay for equal work. And I think that it's very frustrating. I agree. I think that's the best word.
Yeah, well, I'll be brief because everybody said so many very important things. From my perspective, having been here so long and having been at the bargaining table so many times and even playing a leading role at some of the negotiation sessions, I want to call attention to the fact that this has definitely been, and this session is the example, a first of people of a union bargaining with so much member participation. These testimonials that you heard and liked is very unusual. That is not the way bargaining takes place typically. And it's not just a first for our union. I would say it's a first for any union at Rutgers and a first for many unions. It would be for many unions nationally, because that's typically not the way negotiations are done. Typically, a lawyer is the voice of the union, or if not the lawyer, then the president or some representatives. So it was very impressive to me to see all these people participating, aside from the fact, aside from the fact that their testimonials were riveting. You know, I'm saying aside from the subject matter of their testimonials, the fact that we had so many members there at the table speaking was singular. Okay, that's the first thing I wanted to say. Then, you know, everybody talks about how they're so unresponsive and they're so disrespectful and it's so frustrating. Well, get used to it, because that is what they read in their playbook, because the name of the game from their side is say nothing, because anything they say could be used against them. So they are studied in not speaking. And worse than that, I would say they're not listening. Because it doesn't really matter what we have to say. They're still going to do and say what they want to, no matter what. So it's very disheartening, because it's not really an exchange. Bargaining is sort of a misnomer, because, you know, nobody's going back and forth.
So we know that the university has heard what we've said and has not taken it in, or has been there but not necessarily listened. What does this mean for our next moves as a union?
We've only made our case for the salary, the fractional position. And, you know, next time we're going to make our case for longer term appointments, which is really job security, which they don't want that either. They're going to ignore us for that too. So we still have a lot of proposals to present, but I'm not hopeful. I don't expect much different response from them. And if you want my opinion, they're not going to respond until we actually demonstrate to them in real time what we're worth, and do that by withholding our labor. Sorry to say, but that's what I think it's going to take. That demonstrates how much we're worth.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not afraid of saying the S word here. I worded it. And say the S word. Yeah, thank you for making that point. That's really critical. I know the PTL unit, maybe one of you wants to talk about this a little bit more, is sending out regular invitations for people to bargaining and to become more involved.
People can sign up to come to sessions, to witness, and also to participate, to give testimony, and to get involved with our union. We are, as Karen indicated, trying to do this in a new way, which is very democratic, bottom up. The members rule, and that's going to be the key to our success, when people are motivated to take action because of what they experience in these sessions, which is why we bother going through all the details in public. It's not to convince the 4 people who are sitting on the other side of the virtual table.
Thank you so much to everyone for coming and for all of the great things that you contributed. And I really appreciated, for those who weren't here when we recorded the intros, Howie and Dan both talked about the process of drafting these demands too, as being a democratic process of people meeting, saying what their concerns are, and there being a lot of feedback and back and forth, so that those became developed through consensus and through a lot of people's input. And I think it's great to see that you guys are carrying that through in the way that you're handling bargaining too. And we hope that our listeners will join, not only on the receiving end of hearing what's happened, but hopefully participate. We need you with us. So please continue to listen along, join in the fight whenever you can. Thank you.